ROCOUX 1746. Following the defeat of the Pragmatic Allies before Tournai at the Battle of Fontenoy on 30th April 1745, Marshal Saxe, commanding the French army, was enabled to take Tournai. Later, in 1745, the outbreak of the Jacobite rebellion in Britain compelled the withdrawal of the greater part of the British force in Netherlands, with their commander the Duke of Cumberland. During the winter of 1745–46, the French advanced northeast from the river Scheldt and captured Louvain, Brussels, and Antwerp. In the absence of a cohesive pragmatic army spearheaded and largely funded by the British. In June 1746, Lieutenant General John Ligonier returned to Flanders with troops released by the withdrawal of Prince Charles Edward Stuart to Scotland, following the failure of his invasion of England. Ligonier found a far from satisfactory situation. Marshal Saxe lay at Louvain with a powerful French army of around 120,000 men. The Prince of Conti threatened Charleroi from a position further up the river Meuse with another strong French army. The line of towns along the river Meuse, Charleroi, Namur, Liège, and Maastricht, lay under threat from the French. The pragmatic army of Dutch, British, Hanoverian, and Hessian troops took the field on 12 July 1746, late in the campaigning season, marching southwest to prevent the loss of Charleroi. The pragmatic allies met Prince Charles of Lorraine, who commanded a substantial contingent of Austrian troops, bringing the army to around 80,000 men. Marshal Saxe marched from Louvain toward the Meuse, intending to attack the pragmatic army, while Charleroi fell to the French, followed by Namur on around 25 September 1746. To protect Liège, the next town downstream on the river Meuse, under threat from the French, the pragmatic army crossed the Yare River, which forms a right angle to the river Meuse, some 10 miles to the northeast of Liège, and took up positions in the group of villages outside Liège, facing west, with its left flank on the Liège suburbs, where it would receive the French attack. The command structure in the pragmatic army was problematic, until the arrival of the Austrian Prince Charles of Lorraine ensured a paramount commander. Prince Charles being the brother-in-law of the Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. Nevertheless, the various national contingents preserved a high degree of autonomy, which made concerted action difficult. The British and German, Hanoverian and Hessian troops, commanded by General Ligonier, comprising 12 battalions of foot and 5 regiments of horse and dragoons, took the center of the pragmatic position, based on a trio of villages outside Liège, ROCOUX, which gave its name to the ensuing battle, Varus, and Liers. The British and German foot were flanked by the 2 Hanoverian cavalry regiments on the right and the 3 British dragoon regiments on the left. The Dutch took the left of the army, extending from ROCOUX, which they initially held, into the suburbs of Liège, which was fortified and expected to be a barrier against the French. Prince Charles and a strong Austrian contingent took the right of the pragmatic line, based on the villages of Ennick, Vexé, and Slins, and extending towards the Yare River. On the 29th September 1746, Old Style, Saxe's army approached from the direction of Saint-Trond, crossing the river Yare and advancing on Liège from the northwest. Skirmishes with outlying Austrian pickets warned the pragmatic allies of the impending battle. That night the French encamped outside Liège, while the pragmatic troops sent their baggage across the river Meuse in case they were forced to retreat in the face of the overwhelming French strength. It rained all night, which gave way to a heavy mist. On the morning of the 30th September 1746, Old Style, the French army began an advance in 8 columns, 4 of foot and 4 of cavalry. The targets of this advance were Liège itself, the Dutch positions immediately outside Liège, and the British and Germans immediately to the north of the Dutch. The Austrians were beyond the scope of the main French attack. The news soon reached the pragmatic commanders that the authorities of Liège have opened the town gates to the French troops, who were marching through Liège to take the Dutch in the flank. The Prince of Waldeck reformed his line to counter the French attack that would fall on his left flank, and Ligonier took over the defense of the village of Rocoux. At this late stage, steps were taken to fortify the villages, and two British gun batteries deployed to cover the front and left flank of the British and German positions. Two British and two Hessian battalions with the Royal Scots Greys formed a reserve under Ligonier's immediate control. Two further British battalions, the 14th and 26th Regiments, were on the march from Maastricht as an added reinforcements. As the French columns advanced and the mist cleared, Marshal Saxe concentrated his attack on the villages of Rocoux and Varus and on the Dutch, while the Austrians faced only a light diversion. The French troops attacking the Dutch did not begin their assault until around 3 p.m. Heavy fighting took place around the village of Anke, with the Dutch troops strongly resisting the French advance. Once this attack was well established, Marshal Saxe began his assault on the British and Germans in Rocoux and Varus. A battery of 36 guns opened a heavy barrage on the two redoubts. Two columns of infantry then attacked. In all, 52 battalions of French infantry were poured into the two villages, brigade succeeding brigade, as the leaders were repulsed by the strong defense. Even so, within half an hour, the 8 British, Hanoverian and Hessian battalions in the two villages were forced out, although the Hanoverian General Zastrov managed to hold the airs. The two British battalions in reserve, Howard's 19th and Graham's 43rd, resisted the French attack fiercely in a hollow way where they had been posted. Ligonier passed word to the Prince of Waldeck that the two villages, Rocoux and Varus, had been lost, and the Dutch troops began to retire from their positions, as had been agreed before the battle, marching behind the British and German positions toward the River Meuse. The French infantry, after fighting through Rocoux and Varus, emerged in the open country, but were driven back into the villages by the British and Hanoverian dragoons. The British and German battalions, driven from Rocoux and Varus, joined the garrison of Liège under General Zastrov. The two British battalions from Maastricht and the Royal Scots Greys formed a new flank on the left to replace the retreating Dutch regiments, with further flank guards forming as troops came up from the Austrian positions on the right. The British and Hanoverian cavalry kept the French infantry from advancing out of Rocoux and Varus. With this protection, the British and German regiments were enabled to follow the Dutch back to the river. As night fell, the Dutch, British, Hanoverians, and Hessians crossed the River Meuse by 3 pontoon bridges. Marshal Saxe made no effort to interfere with the crossing. The Austrians withdrew to the right, crossed the River Yare, and marched to Maastricht. Despite a series of victories in Flanders, by 1746 France was struggling to finance the war and opened bilateral peace negotiations with Britain at the Congress of Breda in August. While Rocoux confirmed French control of the Austrian Netherlands, Saxe failed to achieve a decisive victory, and the two armies went into winter quarters to prepare for a new campaign in 1747.